Hello, I'm Connor McReynolds, and welcome to The Dinner Party. In this podcast, I ask guests to describe their dream dinner parties, the venue, the menu, and the guest list. Who are their guests? And why are they invited? That's what we're here to find out. This week, I am thrilled to be joined by a voice actor and comedian who I've been lucky enough to perform with at Jericho Comedy on a few occasions. She's such a great performer, using her acting skills and sharp writing to tell great stories and play hilarious characters in her stand-up. Liz Guterbock is my guest on the dinner party this week. Liz has put together a cracking group of guests. I really can't wait to chat to her all about who they are and why they're invited. So without delay, here is the brilliant Liz Guterbock. Liz Guterbock, hello, and thank you so much for joining me on the dinner party.
Oh, hi. Thanks so much for having me, Connor. I'm so excited, as usual.
I'm so thrilled that you're here. We had the pleasure of gigging together very recently, just before lockdown 2.
Yes.
And yeah, it was such a pleasure to see you performing again after what had been a while. I mean, how has 2020 been for you?
It's been, I think, as everybody would probably say, very interesting. It has had sort of all things in this very intense way. I feel like I've had a lot of opportunity to reflect, shall we say? Uh, Opportunity to kind of rejig some things. I think I err on the side of how can I grow from this rather, and again, it's really easy to say that now that I'm through the first part of it. But yeah, it's been challenging. It's some parts of it have been fun, some parts of it have been awful, and some have been wonderful. So yeah, it's kind of been all things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but coming back to performing in sort of a new context, and some of the first shows that I did after the first lockdown just kind of reaffirmed, oh God, I just love this. And
Yeah.
I love being people were so excited to be at the show, just to physically be there. And there was
Yeah.
something really
Yeah.
electric about that. And I was like, yeah, this is a really cool way to spend uh my time and to kind of
Yeah.
just to really enjoy it.
It's sometimes kind of, seen as a bit of a cool attitude to be cynical or dismissive or something. And the sense of relief that everybody had getting back to performing, it was really refreshing
Yeah.
for absolutely no cynicism. Like everyone was just so delighted. There was no one there who seemed like they were too cool to be
Yeah,
at a gig, like
yeah, you're
everyone was just
absolutely right.
excited and delighted.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah, it was really special, and hopefully we get that feeling again in December when gigs come back. Who knows?
No, I know. And I think it's interesting going back into the second lockdown. I think obviously there was the usual anxiety around it, but that seemed to pass much more quickly just because we've done it once. And
Yeah,
I also I read an article that was like 9 ways that this one is different. And I was like, okay, I feel I feel good about that. But being able to go outside as much as we want, I think key for me is making sure I go outside before the sun goes down. Um,
yes.
yeah, the opposite of a vampire, basically. So
I
yeah,
like that. That's how I'm going to think about you from now on. Oh
oh,
yeah, Liz, the opposite of a vampire.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Well, Liz, I just wanted to ask you about your wonderful comedy. I mean, I've had the pleasure of gigging with you a lot at Jericho Comedy. We love having you along to Jericho. You're such a hit with our audiences.
Mm.
Going right back to when you first decided to start comedy, what was it that made you want to take that leap?
Oh gosh. Well, I think I had so I moved to the UK to go to drama school, and I was out of drama school and working various jobs that are not at all related to the arts,
Mm,
office
mhm.
jobs and things like that. That's just, and I understood that that was what was going to happen after school, but I kept being told you need to be writing and producing and doing things on your own in order to get yourself out there. And I was just like,
Mm.
well, how am I going to do that for free? And,
Mm.
Yeah, like how am I going to be able to do that? And I kept going to one of my very good friends. She was starting to do, her name is Leanne Davis. She's an amazing comedy writer, an amazing actor, and we sort of met on some workshops and things. And she invited me along to her comedy gigs, and I just I just kept going. I kept following her to all her gigs.
Right.
And at
Yeah.
a certain point she was like, "Liz, you just need to do this. You just need to start. You just need to do comedy." And I was like, "Please, anything but stand-up comedy." I couldn't think of anything scarier because it is the ultimate, it's you on stage, and to be
Yeah.
like, you have to make people laugh. Oh gosh, that's terrifying. Especially if your family tells you that you're not the funny one, like, all the time.
Oh
Um
no.
I mean, not in a mean way. It's like I'm the little sister, and the way that they would tease me would be like, yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember Liz saying or doing anything funny. And I'm like, "You guys," and then they would all laugh, and I'm like, "Okay, well, that's my shtick." It's being being the miserable little sister. But yeah, it was kind of a slow a slow burn. Like, I started as a in a very serious, like, I started as a, wanting to be an opera singer when I was a kid, and
Oh wow.
training and singing and all that stuff, and everything about it is very serious. Um,
Yeah.
and there's something, the discipline of being a stand-up comedian, you do have to have discipline. You do have to have, you learn the language of comedy and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But the nice thing is that instead of, singing, you get to, and having people just applaud once, you get to make people laugh the whole time. And
Yeah.
it's just more accessible. It's, yeah, and it's really fun. So it's been a long old journey. I feel like I have, I've one of the best things about comedy as well is there's always something more to learn, always a new direction to go, and every
Yeah.
audience is different. And I love being in a room with folks and reading the room and figuring out, what's going to make you guys tick. I love that.
Yeah. It's just like an ongoing mystery or something, and even the more you do it, you still don't crack like a formula that allows you to do well at every single gig.
Yeah.
And there is always that kind of lottery element, which is sort of equal parts intoxicating and terrifying. Because,
Oh,
like, you can
absolutely.
do the same material in different rooms,
Yep.
and whatever the makeup of the room is, or what's gone before you, so many factors can influence how you're perceived in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah, the mood, the day, the time of night, what the host has done, all that stuff. I think some of it kind of falls away. What I love is thinking, before I go on, if there's some element in the room that is like negative, or somebody, there's a rowdy audience member, or there's something that's gone on that kind of is making
Hmm.
people on edge. I just sort of think, okay, how can I change this energy? And it's not like you can't force any of these things, but it's being able to be like, what would sort of lift things back up? I
Mm.
love thinking about that. Whether it's achieved is a different thing. Because believe me, I have walked on stage and I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And everyone's like, "Absolutely not."
You are so happy and so positive when you come on stage. I can't imagine how crushing it must be if that's not immediately reciprocated.
Oh, it can be really off-putting though, because I think there's something, there have been times, I think, especially when I was initially sort of delving further into that energy, where
Mm.
it didn't come naturally. Like, I listened to sets when I first started, and I was pretty serious, matter of fact, and almost verging on, like, trying to be, what's the word? I don't know, misanthropic, I guess. And it just, like,
Mm.
there was this sort of lack of authenticity there. And then when I started to be like, "Oh, what if I was just a little bit more like, 'Hey, how you doing?'" I'm, just owning a little bit more of that California positivity, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
it was really scary, and it wasn't always it I think some people thought, "Well, she's faking it, she's putting it on." And in fact, one of my fellow comedians, when I first started changing the act a little bit, was like, "Oh, this new character, this new positive character is really interesting." I was like, Character? Oh. Oh, is that it?" But the thing is, like, the audience will be able to tell if it's authentic or not, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the audience, yeah, they know. People know when you're putting it on. So it's been really interesting in those moments when maybe I don't always feel what happens if I don't feel like going on stage, or and that's kind of the
Mm.
craft around it. I guess some of the actor's craft comes in that way. It's like people
Yeah.
people do voice exercises, or people do acting exercises when they're not performing, so that when they have to perform, whatever else is going on in your life or at that time falls away, and you can just do it, and it's just
Yeah, yeah.
authentic. So there's something really interesting there, and stand up is very much about you have to show up as you are with the circumstances that are, and do the material that you're doing, and sometimes it really pops and other times it doesn't, but you keep coming back to take that risk. I love it.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you talking about how your I guess persona and
Mm,
your outlook and the mood of your stand up changed. In terms of like the topics you were drawn to and the material that you wrote about in those early parts of your kind of comedy career,
mhm.
how much has that changed since you've gotten to know yourself a bit better, I guess, and feel more settled in comedy and as a writer? Like how's that side of things developed?
Yeah, I think at first I really didn't like the fact that anytime I step on stage, the first thing that people are gonna hear is the accent. The first thing that I'm gonna be,
Hmm.
um, seen as is as an American, and I think there was part of me that's also, I hadn't been here as long, and when you move to a new country, even if you know that country well, like I have English family and I've been here quite a bit, there is that cultural thing where it's like, "Well, I don't wanna be perceived as different. I don't want that
Mm.
to be the thing." So I would do lots of stuff. I would try to talk about anything except that, and
Yeah.
accept my Americanness, and I would stray away from making political jokes and those kinds of things because I thought, "Well, I don't wanna talk about that." And then there came, random things would happen in conversation. This was maybe before I had started stand up. Random things would come up in conversation, and I would just make people laugh with some quip about being American or something like that. And then it sort of started in my comedy. There was a moment where I was like, well, just address it. Make that the thing that you address up front. Talk about your accent. Talk about the fact that you sound like a Kardashian. Lean into it. Make those dumb jokes. And in some ways, people are like, well, the obvious joke is the hack joke. But if it works, it works. And there was something
Yeah.
where if I launch in and say up front, hey, this is who I am, this is how I sound, this is what I look like, then that leads the way for me to talk about literally anything. But for me,
Yeah.
I think what's started to solidify is I want to make people laugh using weird voices, characters, act outs,
Mm.
things like that, where, if I say something in my own voice, it might not be as funny. But if I say it in this character's voice, I'm thinking sort of like I watch people like Maria Bamford, and I watch people who
Mhm.
and Eddie Izzard, and people who use act outs and voices to great effect. And that, I think, is what I've been inspired by, and the direction that I'm going into. Like, I've always done funny, dumb, or well, I should say I've always done voices that are not my own for as long as I can
Mhm.
remember. My brother and I just did weird voices with each other, and watched a lot of The Simpsons and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a thrill for me to see how now I can fit those random weird voices and characters into my stand-up. And that's sort of the direction I see me going in, is that not an impressionist, but,
Mm.
you know, someone who will get the laugh and make you surprised by the characters, I guess, that show up. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds so interesting. I see that in your stand up and your material that I've seen recently. And obviously, it plays into a whole other huge part of your creativity, which is kind of vocal performing and voice acting and voice
Mm.
narration and stuff. How did you find yourself doing that, or did that kind of become your chosen kind of career path?
Well, it's funny because I always wanted to be a professional vocalist, and it started out with music. But
Mm.
and I have a very musical family. Nobody in my family they aren't professional performers. They don't make their living off of being performers. But
Hmm.
music on my dad's side, part of German heritage is so heavily music, and every city has its own choir and that kind of thing.
Mm.
So I thought I was always interested in music and that kind of thing, but when I tried to have a professional career, my voice was like there were just some things that were it's like having a vocal career is so hard, especially in opera and classical music. Um,
Hmm.
and my voice just kind of, I want to say, crapped out on me, but that's, it. I just had a lot of vocal issues, and then
Mm.
I kept being told in opera competitions and things like that. Well, the voice is nice, but it has some issues. But the acting, the acting is great. And I was like, oh well, maybe I'll just skip the music part and do the acting. But when I moved here to go to drama school, and I did my MA for a year, and then one of the actually this ties in with one of my guests today. Basically, I worked an office job in Los Angeles before I moved here, and it was in an accounting firm, and I one of the accountants took me to lunch one day, and we just had a bit of a friendship, and he was an older guy and had just a lovely man who was a lot like a second dad. And
Hmm.
his name is Barry Goldstein, and basically we went to lunch together, and a guy named Maurice LaMarche happened to be sitting at the counter, and Barry um, knew Maurice, and we ended up all having lunch together, and Maurice looked at me, and he'd been listening a bit to our conversation, and he said, you have a really nice voice, you should think about going into voiceover. And we'll discover later who all about Maurice and stuff, but that really struck me because I've always loved animation and all that stuff. And then when I
Yeah.
moved here after drama school, I was looking for agents and doing all the normal stuff that people do after they get out of drama school. But I really wanted to plug my passion into something, and had been told, voiceover would be a good direction for you. And I worked hard to raise the money to get a reel together and to take classes on mic technique, and kind of put myself through school in my own way
Yeah.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
because I have a passion for voice and doing funny voices and dumb stuff with my brother and wanting to be in animated shows like Daria and that kind of stuff. And
Mm.
and I did the legwork and sent out my reels and things to agents, but it took about 2 years until somebody got back to me. Um,
Wow.
and then someone, a wonderful agency called Soho Voices, took a chance on me. And, it all started out quite slowly. But that first job, at the time, I was working at catering. I was doing catering and working in an office and doing
Wow.
things. And I got this corporate job that I can't even remember what the product was, but it was like an internal corporate job. And I got to go into the studio and spend an hour in there at the microphone. And honestly, it was one of the best things. That moment when you pinch yourself, you're like, "Wow, this is really cool." And
Yeah.
it was like, I would get a voiceover job maybe twice a year, and then the next year it was maybe four times, and then the next year it was just slowly and steadily that. But it was someone took a chance on me, and I happened to be, because I have an American accent in the UK, that's
Yeah.
sort of like the thing that's like that uniqueness, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's a huge I don't I'm reluctant to say advantage, but it's just something that immediately sets me apart, which I think is why it's been maybe easier in some ways for me to do it here than it would have been in the US, where everybody has this accent.
Yes,
I
yeah.
shouldn't say
I get the same thing over here. Like
yeah.
people are just interested in the sort of the difference, like
Mm,
not to single you out or anything, but just they're drawn to a different
mm.
kind of accent that they normally hear,
Yeah.
and they comment on it so much, and you're just like, wow. I mean, nobody in Ireland gives a damn how I
Yeah,
sound
nobody
because
nobody
we all sound like this.
But I just
It's
yeah, I just love I love, that's one of the most exciting things about moving here too is, learning the variety of accents in the United Kingdom, and I know that sounds that sounds so probably sounds basic to people who grew up
no, not at all,
the
not
nuance
at all.
and the differences between each region, and it's so exciting, and also is, like, so funny anytime I hear an American, including myself, doing either an English accent, any, any UK-based accent. I'm like, "It's is that how is that how they sound? Is that how they sound?"
I'm always interested when people say like I can do the English accent or the American accent or the Irish accent. You're like, the
Yeah.
English or the American. It's like
Uh,
people from, Queens in New York sound very different to people in Texas. People in
hmm.
Belfast sound very different to people in Dublin.
Yeah, I think what's
S
so fascinating to me as well is that you can have so many different regional accents in such I say relative to the United States, such
mm,
a small portion of the world. Because
yeah.
in the States, I mean, there is a general American accent, I suppose. Like when I lived in California, people would ask me if I was from New York. I think because I talk quickly. I don't know. But but, um but yeah, it's like there are just so many different accents, even from like the central London out to Essex. Like, yeah, it's
Mm.
amazing the variety. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even like I even find it in Ireland. I mean, Northern Ireland is tiny. It's like
Mhm.
2 million people I think live in Northern Ireland,
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah.
And yet across even that country, like I had a friend at school who lived 6 miles up the road from me, but it was a very rural area.
Yeah.
And I used to effectively have to be his translator sometimes to our friends at school because he would speak in such a broad accent.
Oh my
People
god.
would be like, "We have no idea what you just said." And
All all I can say is thank God you were there to be the bridge.
yeah. It's so funny because he's since moved to England and he studied at Durham and then did a PhD at Cambridge.
Wow.
And his accent, out of necessity, has changed so much. It's very, very funny
It's
to
so
hear
interesting.
the kind of broad, sort of culty Northern Irish accent and then mixed up with a kind of bit of chars and bars. And it's
Yeah.
really funny.
I mean, accents and the way that so drama schools used to train regional accents out of actors and drama schools in this country and likely in the
Mm.
States, but I think especially in this country. And my English grandmother, who after the Second World War then moved to California to be with my grandpa, my American grandpa. But
Hmm.
she had, the classical received pronunciation, but her family are all from Leicester. And
Oh,
so
wow.
she when she moved to California, everybody would and my mom always says this, that my grandmother would constantly be asked to be everybody's receptionist because they're like, "Oh, listen to you talk all day." But it's so interesting the training, say, let's say when Judi Dench was at Central School of Speech and Drama,
Mm.
or even Dawn French and Jennifer Saunders when they were there, they would be trained to speak only in the Queen's English, the received
Yeah.
pronunciation, and that's what sort of made you an actor, whereas in the latter part of, I'm not exactly sure, maybe in the '80s, something really changed where it was like, no, the regional accents, and especially now, they will
Yeah.
actively not change your regional accent. Like, you need to be able to do say, I mean, what even is received pronunciation, but estuary English, I guess. You
Yeah.
do that
Yeah.
accent, but your regional accent is you and is what makes you unique, and that it's just a really interesting change.
It's absolutely fascinating. I still think back to like when I was 17. I'd never been to England before, and I was applying for drama schools. I didn't get into any of them, and I think part of it might just be because I wasn't as good an actor as I thought I was. But part of it, I think, was that uh, I had no idea that people in England would find an Irish accent interesting. So I came over, and the two audition pieces I did were both in American accents.
Oh,
I did
wow.
Willie Loman for
Oh,
some mad reason,
I love you when
and
you were
and
17.
17 years old, and I thought, oh yeah, Willie Loman will be my best bet, and Stanley Kowalski from Streetcar Named Desire. And it was just because I was studying those texts at school in English class, and I was like, oh yeah, they're good, like they're good
Connor,
soliloquies. It was mad.
but it's amazing. Think about those lines.
They must have thought, what the hell is he doing? He's a 17-year-old kid from Ireland. Ireland has such a rich literary and theatrical history. I could have chosen
Yeah.
any number of brilliant Irish plays. And instead, I was like, nope, 20th century American, baby. That's how I'm going to get to drama school.
Oh man, but you know what? I so feel you on that, because I think in my mind I'm like, you must be a serious actor. You must
Yes.
do that. And you chose two of the most tragic and I with Stanley, like, yeah, Connor, you had some balls on you. That's amazing.
Oh, man. It was
Oh,
pure ignorance.
I
I
would
mean,
have seen you do that. That would have been
oh,
so great.
I wish you'd seen it too,
I
so
love
we could have
it.
both had a laugh at it. I
But it
should say, I mean, I played Stanley for my A level piece, and I don't like to brag, but I did get full marks for my acting A level as Stanley Kowalski.
I'm
So
so glad. I love that also. You were testing your range, man, and you did it.
I was testing my range.
I
But
love
yeah, I do wonder, would I have ended up at drama school if anyone had said to me, no, if you go over to England, for God's sake, do something in your Irish accent, they will find that interesting.
Interesting, and I think in application notes and things like that, they now do say, if possible, do something close to your age and in your own
Mm,
accent, because but also that's an interesting shift in acting in general across, kind of across the ocean, and nobody had ever seen anybody do something like Marlon Brando did when he was
mm,
Stanley Kowalski on the stage, because he wasn't people were used to say like Laurence Olivier's performances and very affected and all of that, but the real shift in the realness, the rawness, the playing close to who you are, um,
mm,
Elia Kazan and that sort of genre of theater really brought that,
mm.
be yourself and be more,
Yeah,
just sort of heighten what you already have, kind of.
yeah,
But it isn't it so interesting how when we're teenagers, but even now, and even me telling my story about how I was in stand up, I wanted to deny all of the things that I actually was. Or it's like,
yeah.
well, I don't want to be perceived as this American person who lives in England, even though that's exactly what it is.
Yeah,
Or I don't want to be the
it's
17-year-old kid from Ireland, even though that's exactly what you are. It's that ownership of
absolutely.
yourself that we're like, no, no, anything but that.
It's such a fascinating thing, isn't it? That you mentioned the word earlier, and it's a whole concept that I've just become more and more fascinated by recently when talking to wonderful creative people like you on these podcasts. You mentioned the word authenticity,
Mm,
and I think it is one of just the most important things in any kind of performance or creative skill.
yeah.
And you lack the, I guess, maturity and self-awareness when you're that bit younger
Mm,
to understand what authentic is, and you're so influenced by what you have seen that you want to emulate that. Like the first time I ever tried stand up, I'd watched so much Dylan Moran, and I just thought, oh my god, that's exactly what I want to do. And
yeah.
I, like you, tried to be so serious and deadpan, uh, kind of bemused and grumpy on stage, and that's just also not who I am either.
Opposite of who you are. Yeah.
Um, and it's so interesting that it takes us to get a bit more experience, life experience, and like even off stage, away from everything,
Mm.
just a bit of context, maturity to know who we are, where we are in our lives, to kind of value that authenticity. And yeah, it's
Interestingly, with lockdown, I felt like there was almost a forced reckoning of some of that stuff.
yeah.
A drilling down into what are the parts of my life that that I really cherish, and what are the parts that I can maybe let go of, or what can I loosen the death grip on. But most importantly, you know, and not, I guess it's important to distinguish this from like an egoic, self-centered looking at oneself and taking stock,
Hmm.
and a more like, I guess, global, open, who am I? What do I want? What can I offer? Kind of looking inward, I guess. And
Mm,
that's kind of what happened to me in the first lockdown. And I also recognize very well that that's a privilege in lots of ways, because also, as someone who was already freelance, I was sort of set up for the uncertainty of what happened in
yeah,
lockdown.
yeah.
And it was more like, well, how do I take on more uncertainty? And I had, in some ways, was already, I guess, prepared to be working at home and things like that. But it's that embracing of the having the maturity, or the, I don't know, the experience, I guess, to be like, oh, what do I really value? And to really honestly answer that question, um,
Hmm.
and be okay with the answer, I think, where it's like, oh, I should embrace these parts of myself, even though in the past I may have denied them or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's like you were saying earlier, how you feel excited and continually excited by the new challenges and the new curveballs sometimes that comedy can throw you. And I think this is maybe one of them, that as we go on, with doing more stand up or writing more or finding our voice that bit more, the exciting thing then becomes, okay, well, I've got all this stuff that I've written on
Mm.
this thing, but actually that's not the stuff that I'm still really interested in talking about. And if I'm being honest with myself, I really want to talk more about this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's finding a new way to present yourself and your thoughts on stage and in your writing.
Mm.
And it's fun. I mean, it's a scary challenge, but it's fun as well.
It is. I think it's like there's an impatience to it as well, where it's like, well, I just want to make my mark and I want to be that developed stand up already. And that's definitely my dad's voice. But I think, but it's like, being, being all right with seeing it unfold. I think that's something that I've had to get really okay with, being like, well, is
Mm,
it ever a finished product? So if like, am I always in development? And partially yes, but also there will be those things that I guess solidify. It's like, now I know that I'm going to be talking about being American in the UK, and the nuance comes from, well, how am I doing that? And then how does that lead to
mm,
being able to talk about lots of other things, stupid things, serious things, whatever. I tend to stay away from politics, but I like to think that underneath it all, there's something sort of vaguely like poking fun at some of the, I guess, the powers that be, without saying their names, maybe.
yes. Yeah, you can judge yourself, listener, who we might
Who
want to make
are
fun
you
of.
talking about? Definitely, yeah. William
Liz,
Shatner.
there's.
Anyway.
Yeah, Bill, your time's coming. We're going to make so much fun of you.
You made some funny CDs. Yeah.
There is so much, Liz, that I want to talk to you about this afternoon,
Mm.
and none more so, really, than your dream dinner party, which is why we're here. I'm so excited. You've put together such a great range of guests.
Man.
Before we get into kind of finding out the who and the menu and all the rest of it, uh, just to sort of give us a little flavor of what a Liz Guterbock dinner party is like, what do you think would be the tone of your dream dinner party with the people that you've got and where you're planning to do it? Is it going to be a really lively, boozy, kind of raucous affair? Is it going to be more of a stimulating conversation long into the night kind of thing?
So it's so to get the tone of this thing as I'm looking at my guest list, I'm thinking it's going to be a long, yes, boozy, but sort of that like classy boozy. We have a lot of booze, but over a long period of time, kind of,
Yeah.
leisurely but fun, lively conversation. A very warm, I hope, a warm atmosphere, jovial, but not necessarily raucous. Although there's one person who might get raucous. Yeah, so I think, we're thinking like a full table setting and courses and things like that. Maybe a candelabra. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I've gone. Yeah, even the word sumptuous. I think for some of these people, the word sumptuous is necessary because I'm not sure they'd be satisfied with anything else.
I love that it's on their kind of cultural and emotional rider that the evening must be sumptuous.
Yeah, yeah, I think
That
so.
is brilliant. I definitely see that as well in the group of people that you put together.
Yeah.
Nothing less than sumptuous will suffice. Well, Liz, where would this sumptuous evening be happening? If you could do it anywhere in the world, if you could take over any place, where would it be?
Oh, this is gonna be such a juxtaposition of an answer. I would host it at Dollywood.
Oh, God, yes. That is brilliant. I've never been to Dollywood. Have you been before?
Never been to Dollywood, and it is my life's dream that I don't really admit to anybody, but it is my life's dream to go to Dollywood, because gosh, it's a whole land of Dolly Parton. She's made it,
Oh.
and it has this like I'm not sure if any listeners will be familiar with it, but there's a place called the Madonna Inn that's outside a place called San Luis Obispo in California, and
Mhm.
it's just they have a room with the caveman room and the velvet Elvis room and these very kind of tacky Americana, I guess, but there is a sumptuousness to it, and I know that Dolly and Dollywood is done in such a specific way that honors where she came from, but it's also
Mhm.
going to be very nice and homey and also kind of like slightly it'll have sequins, but it will be sometimes tasteful and sometimes really not tasteful, but in its own way, it's like this. Yeah, I feel like a sumptuous meal could be had at Dollywood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the excitement everyone would feel just going through the gates, knowing you're going into Dollywood.
I think
That would
again,
be,
I think some people in this group would be really excited about it. I think other
I
people
think so.
would be like, Please no."
Yeah, you might need to tell them a little white lie about where they're going for
Mm,
dinner, perhaps.
mhm.
Well, that is, I mean, what a great setting for a dinner party. And now we need to find out about your guests. Your,
Yeah.
your first guest is a French born American chef, author, TV personality, and artist. He was a close friend of Julia Child and had an Emmy Award winning TV show with her. You're inviting Jacques Pepin to your
Yeah.
dinner party.
Yes, I am. He is such a wonderful wonderful man. His book a friend of mine knows that I adore Jacques Pepin, and I should say that, one of the reasons I was introduced to him, I mean, I don't know him personally, but I was introduced to Jacques on TV on his PBS show. It's Julia and Jacques cooking at home, and it's Julia Child and Jacques
Mhm.
Pepin cooking, and it's one of the most relaxing and wonderful shows in the whole world. And also, doing a Julia Child impression is one of the most fun activities to do. So if
It's
if
so
you
true.
haven't tried it, please try it. Um, but Jacques and Julia, I think I chose Jacques partly because the recipes in his book that my friend gave me, it's called The Apprentice: My Life in the Kitchen. The
Mm.
recipes in his book vary all the way from, really home cooked, made by his mother, all the way to cooking for the highest dignitaries in France. Um,
Yeah.
it's such a perfect sort of explanation of Jacques Pepin as well and his history, because he started with French classical cooking and
Hmm.
learned all the incredible chef skills and became a very well renowned, very well respected chef in France, and then went to America and, like Julia Child, kind of revolutionized the way Americans think about food, so that simplicity, freshness and simplicity of food can be quick and easy, but also elegant and, yeah, kind of walk that line between
Mm.
everyday and sumptuous, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not someone who I knew a huge amount about, but I obviously read up about him, watched a couple of his videos,
Mm.
and he's got a very nice voice, like a very relaxed manner in the kitchen,
And
and
I
I can
love
definitely see why he'd be a nice person to spend time with.
Oh, he just seems so lovely, and when, there's a I'm a little reluctant to do, but he has this very soft-spoken, lovely way about him, a lovely French accent and a little bit of a lisp, which
Hmm.
I find so comforting, and when he would be with Julia Child, who's a little bit more boisterous, their sort of juxtaposition was so nice, and, Julia always being like, "Well, we need to add a little bit of butter and do some white wine, and we'll put some white wine in the chicken and then have some for us," and, Jacques would be Jacques would be over there just, "Well, Julia, we shall do this, and, it will be very nice." Yeah, I'm doing the voice. Am I allowed to do the voices? I don't know.
I
But
love that you're doing the voices.
but he's so peaceful, and I feel like he'd be a very calming, presence at the table. Now he is in his later life now, but
Yes.
as far as I understand, still incredibly dynamic and lovely. He just seems like a lovely guy.
He
Um,
does. He does. And I think one of the best things anyone can do is to chat to, well, I guess more generally speaking, to chat to anybody about their passion. Like
mhm,
it's why I love the conversations we have, particularly on this podcast, is because you speak to people about what they're really passionate about, and people just throw themselves into the conversation wholeheartedly. And
mhm,
to have someone at a dinner party whose whole life is dedicated to passion for food and flavor
mm.
and texture and quality and all these wonderful things associated with food. I find talking to foodies about food just to be one of the best ways you can spend time. I mean, what would you want to talk to Jacques about if you've got him there at your dinner party?
I think one of the things I would do is, would be to thank him for all the comforting television that he gave me when I was a kid. Like, it's just lovely, but also, I think I'd really wanna talk to him about his time at, Howard Johnson's. I don't know, so Howard Johnson's is this big, chain of, hotels and restaurants, or I should say
Hmm.
motels and restaurants that used to be on American motorways. And he
Hmm.
went and became an executive chef and to try to get, like, the same food in each Howard Johnson's. And it
Hmm.
I mean, is that what I would speak to him about? I mean, I think I'd just want him to tell me stories about, stories of him in the kitchen. It's like, I know I've read his book, but it would just be great to hear those things from his mouth. And also to just ask him, what does he eat every day now? What are some of his
Mm.
favorite things to eat? And, what else would I ask him about? I'd ask him about Julia Child for sure.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
ask him about his time with Julia and, what it's like for him to be, I guess, um, seeing. he writes some things in his in the book about how, the Food Network and all those things didn't exist, obviously, and he was at the forefront
Hmm.
creating that stuff. And I think I would ask him if he finds online recipes as frustrating as we all do.
That's a great question to ask him.
Mm, yeah, because like I don't know. I know there's this trope that everybody is like, right, do I have to read your life story before I figure out how to make the chocolate chip cookies?
Absolutely. 6 chapters on why these cookies are important to you before you actually realize there are only 4 ingredients. Yeah.
Whereas, obviously, I would be interested to hear his sort of take on how, I guess, how the internet has maybe changed cooking and accessibility and that kind of
Mm.
stuff, and sort of almost how having too much choice can maybe paralyze us from wanting to do anything in the kitchen.
Yeah. The book that you describe,
Mhm,
where it's kind of a mix between sort of haute couture and kind of more homely, simple comfort recipes,
mhm.
it sort of sounds like the perfect cookbook because it sounds like something that you could dip into for like an everyday recipe, or if there was a special occasion and you wanted to make something nice and fancy,
Yeah.
you could find something like that in there. Have you got a favorite Jacques Pepin recipe that you make?
So this is the thing. I've had this book on my shelf for probably 10 years now, and I have never made anything out of it.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's crazy, and I think in some way okay, so I remember watching one of Jacques Pepin's, shows, and this was when he was by himself. I can't remember the name of the show when it's just his cooking show, but, he he, um, goes to slice an orange, but he, like, uses this knife technique to kind of take the membrane out, and I'm not describing this very well at all, but it's almost like I've watched him so much that I'm afraid to mess up his recipes.
Oh, wow.
So I don't have a favorite one that I make all the time, and I just feel like, God, I really hope he doesn't hear this.
I'm sure because education seems to be such a big part of his work as well. Like,
Yeah.
his earlier cookbooks were kind of they sort of revolutionized cookbooks as a whole industry with lots of photos to show you demonstrations of culinary methods and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that based on the fact, I mean, he and Julia Child also created the first master's degree in gastronomy in the world.
Yeah.
So I'm sure his attitude would be give it a go.
That is exactly
I'm sure he wouldn't want you to be kind of paralyzed by fear.
exactly, he says that in nearly every chapter of this book. He's just like, the important thing is to try it, and one of the most interesting things in this book is where he says, the, how people overcomplicate things, and
Yeah.
how what he realized in his time at Howard Johnson's was that training people to cook in a restaurant is incredibly different from training people to cook at the in the home. So
Mm, mhm.
you won't have to keep something warming, the potatoes warming forever, a big vat of potatoes warming forever if you're presenting a meal to your friends. Like there are certain aspects of cooking in the home that are much easier than in a chef's kitchen, and how do you make a cookbook to reflect that? So, that's where
Mm.
he was really revolutionary, I guess, is, making the home cook feel exactly that, at home. And
Yeah.
Julia similarly. So yeah, I realized my paralysis is, I think he would be able to talk me out of it, let's just say.
I think so. Well, hopefully he would do that at dinner.
I feel bad
Um
I feel bad giving him a task, I have to.
You're inviting him to dinner to cure you of one of your own hang-ups.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
exactly. No, let's not have the dinner party be a therapy session. Let the man enjoy his meal, for God's sake.
I love this. That it sounds like what you've really put together is the plot of The Wizard of Oz,
Oh
where
my god, yes!
all the characters there showed you that The only missing ingredient was your own confidence in yourself all along.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so perfect. Especially given the rest of the guest list. I'm like, yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, they could definitely teach you a few things. I mean, Jacques Pepin, great first guest. And your next guest's another absolute belter. She is an actor, comedian, talk show host, and author. She's one of a very few people to have ever EGOTed, which is, of course, to have won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony Award. She's loved for her roles in the Sister Act movies, Star Trek, amongst many other things. You're inviting Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes.
When did you become a Whoopi fan?
Oh man, it's a mixture of things. I was a huge Star Trek fan. I
Oh.
Next Generation, thank you. Next Generation, and that's why is that why I threw shade on Shatner earlier? Maybe. I'm not but I think so yes on Star Trek, but I think Sister Act is probably foremost in my mind because that's what I watched the most as a kid, but also just going through she's so funny in Ghost, which is obviously a very sad movie, but she is the much needed comic relief and she's just so excellent. So Sister Act is probably how I fell in love. Now, Connor, I'm going to admit something to you right now that's very
Okay.
embarrassing, but I didn't
Let's do this.
realize that Sister Act is actually like a play. The title, How Clever. I didn't realize how clever it was. Because I didn't realize that a group like the Supremes and Martha and the Vandellas and those types of groups are called often sister acts, or that there would be groups of sister singers. They would be a sister act. And then the title of the film is Sister Act. And it's funny
Liz,
because
I have just learned something.
they're fun. It's funny because they're nuns.
It works on levels. I mean, I always think of the wonderful title to the sequel, Back in the Habit. I mean,
give me
one of the greatest puns ever.
It's great. But that movie, I just loved that movie. It had everything, and music and choirs. And when I was in high school, I was in choirs, and choirs were cool at our school, everybody. So,
Oh,
yeah, choirs were super cool.
you were lucky. At my school, I was the only... Oh, no, sorry. I was one of only 2 boys in the choir, and it was not cool.
Oh, I'm so sorry. But
But
what?
I watched Sister Act 2, and I was like, oh, man, those kids are so cool in the choir. I wish all the other kids at my school knew how cool this was.
I wish everyone at school knew how cool you were because you played Stanley Kowalski. Okay. Like, yeah. Okay, Connor, you were cool. It's just
I'm gonna post this to like a group of everyone in my old school. It's like, see guys, I'm 33 now and I am cool.
I love it. But yeah, I mean, what a woman. And that movie I watched it all the time. Now, controversially, I prefer the first one to the second one.
Oh, I'm with you there.
Okay.
I am with you
Good.
there. But both very fine films.
Yeah.
And of course, rumors persist of a Sister Act 3. How do you feel about that?
I didn't know that. This is new.
I've heard rumors.
Connor,
We don't know if it's true.
what's the pun gonna
But oh my goodness.
What's it gonna be? I wish I could work quickly enough to discover it. But
Oh, I know. I wish I were an improviser because I'd have just come up with a killer nun pun there.
I know.
That's a damn shame. What I might end up doing is saying something in 4 hours' time and then editing it in here. And everyone listening will be like, oh, that is amazing.
The only thing I could think of was "Don't cross me," but that's just not gonna.
Oh, I like it.
I don't know. Is that okay, everybody?
I mean, even Whoopi's name is a kind of funny little joke in itself. Apparently, she got the stage name Whoopi because she used to get gassy before going on stage.
Oh my
and
God.
people told her she was like a whoopee cushion.
I didn't know that. I love
So
that.
she just called herself Whoopi. I loved reading about Whoopi because she is such a fascinating person. Like when you read about aspects of her earlier life and stuff, she's just incredible. Like before she was an actor and a comedian, She was a bricklayer in Florida in the
What?
70s.
Oh my gosh.
And she also worked as a mortuary makeup artist. Like,
Wow.
that's mad. She's an honorary Harlem Globetrotter. She was the first African American woman to host the Oscars and the first woman to solo host the Oscars.
I mean,
I mean, she's just this incredible person. Like, what qualities do you think she would be bringing to your dinner party as a guest?
well, I think she would be bringing quite a lot of fun, but also I would be so um curious and just I guess reverent to hear about how things have changed over the course of her career, but also, currently everything going on with Black Lives Matter and
Mm,
just she's in such a prominent position in a country that is so um it's in turmoil, I think, in
mhm.
quite a few good ways, asking tough questions and things. I think that's really good. But yeah, gosh, I think she just brings so much experience, a wealth of knowledge and fun. I feel like Whoopi is one of those people who is just she's everywhere. She's
Mm,
and her voice is in The Lion King, and seeing her play like
yeah,
evil character, but then also yeah, evil in the or I guess a minion in
yeah.
in The Lion King, and then also, I mean, The Color Purple. And I also didn't realize, about her I think there's solo stage shows as well. Um
Yeah, that's apparently how Steven Spielberg kind of discovered her for The Color Purple was through a Broadway show where she did like a range of different characters and monologues.
yeah, and I mean, she's just so incredible, and looking at
Yeah.
her journey from the stage and all the way through to all these other places, and she won a Grammy for her stand-up album, and,
Mm,
it's just impressive and, uh, seems like a really cool and interesting person. Um, yeah.
yeah. Totally, totally get that. I mean, she's so multi-talented, which I think we've talked a lot about authenticity and the importance of authenticity, and I think she's someone who very clearly has such a strong sense of her own voice and who she is and her creativity. She's so confident in that, but
Yeah.
also her creativity is so multifaceted. I mean, she is this brilliant actor, this wonderful stand-up. She's an author, TV presenter, producer and so many other things. As a kind of fellow multi-talented creative person, is there a particular aspect of her work or creativity that you'd really want to delve into?
I think probably the origins of the stage show, the solo stage show, and how,
Mm,
are there any links to maybe her artistic growth when she, what she's doing now, how it felt to have that as a jumping off point. What I'm really always curious about asking about people's mindsets when these big things happen, the sort of, I guess, the trope in showbiz is Steven Spielberg calls, and that
mhm.
actually happened to her, and I'd be
Yeah.
curious to find out, how what was going on in your life at that time when that happened, and what are some of the things that you've carried with you from then until now that have stood you in good stead. Um, and,
Mm,
I think she says very candidly in some of her writings, it's like, she's she's family oriented and she knows, who she can trust, and she just seems like a real powerhouse in her personal life. So without getting too personal, I'd want to ask her, what are the things that sort of ground her and have been the through line throughout her career.
yeah. Oh, they're great questions.
Mhm.
I wonder how Whoopi does kind of unwind and relax.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure being Whoopi Goldberg is probably quite exhausting.
I mean,
She's
can you imagine this?
so energetic and
Yeah. Just the schedule because I'm not sure
yeah.
if she's still presenting on The View. I should have researched that, but
I think she is.
yeah,
Yeah, I think
but
she
I
still
mean
does.
that the daytime television schedule is grueling, and, how she finds time to do all the other stuff, I don't know. Also, I maybe would wanna ask her, like, would she ever consider doing a stand-up show again? Because,
Oh,
uh
wow, yeah.
yeah, or maybe she has and I don't know about it, but, But I would be, yeah, I think I might also ask her, yeah, do you miss stand up? Do you miss the circuit? What's that like? And I know it's obviously this circuit has changed so much since she was doing it, but I would also ask her, like, what was it like being on the circuit back in the 80s, and, yeah, all those curious questions. I have a lot to ask.
Yeah. There'd be so much to ask, Whoopi. It would be a very busy evening for even at your dinner party as well. But another terrific choice. Your third guest, we heard a little bit about this person earlier.
Mm.
This person is like you, a comedian and a voice actor. He was the voice of the Brain in Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, as well as appearing in so many other shows like Futurama, SpongeBob SquarePants, Batman the Animated Series, The Simpsons, and Rick and Morty. You're inviting the wonderful Maurice LaMarche,
Yes,
a man with whom you've already dined.
I have dined with him at a place that I don't believe exists anymore. As I say, when I was in Los Angeles working in my accounting job, I was not an accountant. I was the executive assistant to the CEO at the accounting firm. And the accountants very kindly would sometimes take me out to lunch because they knew I couldn't go to the fancy places that they would go to. So this
Mm.
place was downstairs from our office called Sasabune. It's a sushi restaurant. Again, I don't think it exists anymore, but it was fabulous. Anyway, Barry Goldstein took me down to have lunch, and at the lunch counter was or at the sushi bar was Maurice, and just what a lovely man, really generous. Had obviously done Pinky and the Brain, and it's at that time. And what's so funny is when we would talk, or when we were talking, um he sort of was blasé. I think at that moment I didn't really realize who he was, and
Mm.
he just was so matter of fact about his career and about being a working actor. And when he said, "Oh, you have a lovely voice, you should think about going into voiceover," it was said in such a genuine way. And I should say that in Los Angeles, again, we come back to authenticity. It's not that people in LA aren't authentic. There are obviously wonderful, wonderful people there, but there is a
Hmm.
lot of hot air that gets passed around.
Sure.
That that comment from Maurice just really stayed with me because it was offered in such a just a lovely and generous way. Like, he didn't
Yeah.
there was no prompting, he didn't have to say that kind of thing, and it was lovely. But I think when I went back and I researched, I was like, "Oh my god," and I told all my friends who are equally, like, voice actor nerds that I'd met Maurice LaMarche, and it was this big thing. It's like, "He voices Morbo in Futurama, and he did Brown in Animaniacs, and he also does an incredible Orson Welles,
Absolutely.
which
It's really extraordinary.
and if anybody has the chance, if the listeners have the chance, go and watch one of my favorite animated shows that got canceled, but it was, The Critic, and he does a parody of Orson Welles, doing an ad for Rosebud frozen peas, and it's just such a perfect send up. And again, I feel like in Maurice's impressions, obviously he's making fun of Orson, he's making fun of these people, but it is done in a generous and seemingly, to me, a loving way. Like, I feel like you can make fun of
Yes.
people in a loving way, and
Oh, yeah, yeah. I
obvious.
think that's the key to,
Yeah.
not that I know much about impressions.
Mm.
I did have the chance to speak to wonderful Josh Berry on this
Oh
podcast,
gosh,
and
what an
he
impression.
is, I mean, such a master impressionist.
Incredible.
And yeah, he spoke a bit about it, about how it's just vital to sort of have a bit of love or respect for the person that you're impersonating,
Yeah.
because you can tell when an impression is an affectionate one and when it's a kind of mean-spirited one. You
Yeah.
can sort of get the sense from the tone or the way that that person is dealt with, I guess.
Yeah.
And certainly, yeah, Maurice LaMarche clearly holds Orson Welles in great regard.
And I mean,
Um,
just the versatility in Maurice's voice is so incredible, and how he sustains Morbo in Futurama, I'll never know. Because, like, one of the things in voiceover is being able to sustain a voice over a long period of time is
Mm.
incredibly important. I think about some of the Simpsons voices, the scratchiness of Selma and Marge, and
Yeah.
you just think, gosh, how can you sustain that over 20 years, something like that? But
Yeah, it's insane.
ooh,
It's
call the
insane.
cops. Call the cops. Maurice's voice is in danger. Um,
It's a crime how talented this man
yeah,
is.
totally.
I think my favorite character of his on Futurama is Ziff or is
Is it Blur?
no. No, it's Zap Brannigan's assistant. What's he called again?
Is it Lur? No.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
Google this. This is terrible.
because I have.
How could I ever forget Kiff? Of course, Kiff.
I'm not.
Oh, how could I forget that? Because Zap Brannigan has that immortal exchange with Kiff. Kiff, have the boy lay out my shorts. It's like, the boy, sir. You do it, Kiff. You lay out my shorts. it's,
He's
it's one of my favorite exchanges.
Oh God, I would ask Maurice so many questions about just nerdy voiceover questions, and like, how did you find your voices, and
Do you have a favorite performance or character of his that you'd sort of want him to perform for you at dinner? Would that
well,
be
I mean,
cheeky?
I know it's the Orson Welles one, because that's the one that sticks in my mind as I mean, the rosebud peas, the rosebud frozen peas bit is just so joyous and so good, and I would want him to do it at the
I'm
table.
gonna have to check this out.
Oh, it's so funny. But also, I think Maurice kind of melds these two worlds. When I first moved to, or I should say, when I was first out of drama school, it was actually in a play called It's All True, and it was all about Orson Welles, and I got to play. It was a dual role thing, and I
Oh
got to
wow.
play Virginia Wells, who was married to Orson. I think it was his first wife, and then Jean. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Oh, I can't. It's terrible. I can't remember her last name, but she is it Rosenthal, I think. She was the stage manager at the oh gosh, I'm blanking right now. At the as part of the Federal Theater Project. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so I went into this sort of like obsession with Orson Welles, and that was one of the things, the rosebud frozen peas bit was one of the things that I came across in some of my research, and I was like, wow, what a melding of worlds that one of my favorite voice artists obviously does an impression of Orson, and the research bit of any role is so fun because you end up coming across all these random things where it's like these people lift up these older heroes of yours, I guess, and kind of shed new light on them in a funny way.
Yeah.
I love that about comedy because you can just shed new light on things and have an appreciation for people, and then it makes them go back and maybe research about the person that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've talked myself in circles, but it's just because
No, it's great.
I'm thinking about meeting Maurice and just like, how many questions would I ask him? So many. Again, I need to concentrate on serving the food and making sure everyone is fed and watered instead of bombarding them. But I feel like Whoopi and Maurice would have quite a bit to talk about, and Jacques would just be a lovely calming presence as well. So
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean, Maurice is a superb addition to the dinner party. And of course, you've mentioned your next guest just then, someone who's obviously influenced the work of Maurice LaMarche. He's considered to be one of the finest filmmakers of all time. He was an actor, director, writer, and producer whose first ever film was a little one called Citizen Kane. You're inviting Orson Welles.
Yes, I am. And what a guy. Now, I couldn't decide which time in Orson's life I would have invited
Oh,
him.
that's
I w
interesting.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was unsure, I was unsure whether it would be early Orson or later Orson, and it's yeah, obviously, there would be so many questions to ask of later Orson, but, I think I would be particularly interested in talking to him when he was part of the Federal Theater Project. Um, because basically FDR, and at that time in America, it was the Great Depression, and there
Hmm.
was a lot of funding happening for the arts, and Orson Welles was given a theater, and actors were paid, union wages and things to create shows, and there ended up being a lot of conflict about money and those things. And Orson Welles, being Orson Welles, also always ran over budget and always ran over. So just really fascinating. And his politics were fascinating. I think he was put on some of the Hollywood blacklists during the time of
McCarthyism.
McCarthy. Um, Also, although maybe he was a lifelong member of the International Brotherhood of Magicians, which I just love.
That is so cool.
The Society of American Magicians. Apparently, I read, now my source is Wikipedia, people, and I know that that's not a great, but I just thought that was a fascinating little fact. I'm not sure what any tidbits that you found on Orson, Connor.
I sort of came up unfortunately a little bit short. I think there was so much to read on Orson Welles, and time unfortunately worked against me. But I did say, like, we think of him as this kind of very intense, serious man,
Mm.
takes his craft ever so seriously. But he did guest star in I Love Lucy.
Did he?
He did, yeah, with Lucille Ball, who has coincidentally also been a guest on the dinner party previously.
Wonderful.
Um, but yes,
Well,
that was my little very un-Orson Welles tidbit that I found, was that he'd guest starred in I Love Lucy.
but that's
Uh,
what's so interesting about Orson, because yes, he was this very serious actor, and I mean, I think the War of the Worlds recording is one of the most fascinating things ever.
yeah.
Just to say, for anybody who might not know, when the War of the Worlds was broadcast across America, quite a few people thought that it was real, that aliens were really taking over,
Yes,
and
the structure of it was kind of interrupted by fake news broadcasts that people mistook as real news broadcasts about a Martian invasion.
And so I guess there's some sort of, I would want to ask Orson all about, fake news and
Mm.
censorship and public funding for the arts and those kinds of things. I think he'd have a lot to say about that.
God,
Um,
yeah.
and he always defined himself as a progressive, a political progressive. Interestingly,
Yeah.
I also found that he was really outspoken on the evils of racism and segregation at that time, which I think would have been a very difficult in that time period, in the
Yeah,
early.
I mean, even in the 1930s, he put together a production of Macbeth with an all-black cast in New York, which I can
That's
imagine at the time was probably relatively unheard of.
yeah. So really, I mean, someone who used his career. Well, if you think about Citizen Kane and the sort of overarching message of the power of news media, it was
Mhm.
supposed to be, I guess, based on Hearst, William Randolph Hearst, and the just these big newspaper magnates and how much power they had, and
Mm.
just he's yeah, Orson is a lot to take in, and when I was doing my research on him, I have the most written down about him, but probably there's just so much to talk about. Also, I think important to mention that Orson, I guess, in the end or the later in his life, people talk a lot about his weight. They do.
Yeah,
That is one thing I think that Maurice touches on a bit in his send up in the Rosebud Frozen Peas thing. But some of the reading that I did as well is that Orson, when he was younger, was a very tall, very piercing eyed kind of young man.
yeah.
I guess it was crash diets and things like barbiturates and corsets and things like that that kept him thin in his early Hollywood career. And that
Mm.
is very similar to literally anyone who was part of the studio system, like Joan Crawford and Judy Garland, and all those people were on all these crazy diets and things. And so their weight just yo-yoed, and it
Mhm.
it's all the industry pressure, I guess. And so later in his life, he just really, food and booze and all those things, he was able, I mean, he had access to them. And I think it was, you know, it's to me, it smacks of difficulty of someone who, who just wants, he's such a talented,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's really sad that sometimes that's how he becomes remembered. I guess similar to Marlon Brando, where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. It's a really good comparison.
yeah,
I mean, you mention his kind of freakish talent. Not that you used the word freakish, that was perhaps a bit of an unnecessary word for me to use, but a kind of an astonishing multiplicity to his creativity, shall we say. I mean, as well as
absolutely.
all the things that he was famous for. Like earlier in his life, he was a poet and a cartoonist, and he designed theatre sets when traveling around Europe, like
Yeah.
famously at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, kind of Ireland's biggest and
Mm,
best theatre. And then
cool.
later in his career, he even was like a bit of a Michael Palin type, made a travel series for the
Wow.
BBC.
Oh my God, I
Um,
didn't know that. That's
yeah,
great.
apparently he made like a 6-part series for the BBC where he went around different places in Europe and for a little kind of travel log series for BBC. I
Wow.
mean, those aspects of his creativity and experience that perhaps we aren't as familiar with, would that be something that you would want to kind of hear more about from him?
I mean, absolutely. I think you can tell that he has just an overflowing, sometimes unstoppable creative brain, just in the way that he ran his productions, everything. I mean, even if you look at the shots in Citizen Kane, you think about how many moving parts there were to each one and what he did. I think it'd be so fascinating to ask him, what are the smaller parts that you're really fascinated by? What were the most
Mm.
exciting parts of travel? What is it like when you would land in a hotel room? What would be the first thing that you would do? Because you obviously traveled the world. But what are the things, for better lack of a phrase, what are the things that really spark joy and excitement for you? Um,
Hmm. That's
in
so
the day to day,
interesting.
I guess the small things, because we think of Orson as this huge, he is a huge personality, but
Yes.
then what I guess I would wanna ask him about what are the small things that you enjoy? What are the quiet times that you enjoy? Um, and yeah, some of the smaller projects, I guess, would fall into that. I did had no idea he was a cartoonist, but that's fascinating. And, like, would he voice those cartoons if he got them made? Like, what would
Yeah.
he like, that kind of thing?
I can't imagine anyone better suited to voice a
Oh,
cartoon than Orson Welles.
I know. I
Perhaps
mean, what
Maurice LaMarche, maybe.
possibly. I mean, what a voice. But Orson's voice is just so impressive, and it's the immediate gravitas, the depth of it, and
Yeah.
if you listen to those recordings of War of the Worlds, it's like, no wonder people were scared.
I know what you mean. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. How do you think a kind of creative behemoth like Orson Welles would operate in today's kind of entertainment landscape? Like, I can't picture him making TikTok videos, but what
Mhm.
kind of work do you think he would be producing? And do you think he would still stand out now if he were a young man getting started now?
Oh, goodness. I That's such a good question. I would like to think, I'm afraid to say that I think he would be adaptable to today's means, but I think
Hmm.
he would really take it into his own hands. I think one of the most exciting things about Orson was that he found ways to do things his own way. And sometimes that got him into trouble, but another time, I mean, in terms of over budget and all that, even early in his career, but I feel
Mhm.
like that ambition would actually stand him in good stead. And he would have opportunities to be on camera all the time, which he
Yeah.
might actually really like. But I feel like early Orson Welles would be less prone to distraction, like, he'd have a real agenda about what he wanted to use it for, and I think he would
Mm.
probably also be really interested in, maybe I mean, I think he'd be fascinated, interested, horrified by the the politics part of it, but I think he would be able to harness some of that in a really clever way in his art and in his, maybe, I think, theater making. I think his focus would probably still be on live work and the importance of that, because even
Hmm.
for me today, I think, I love recorded media. I love TV, I love film, and, voiceover and cartoons and all of that stuff. But there's something about live theater that all of us are collectively missing right now. And I
Yeah.
feel like if Orson were alive now, he would find a way to, especially if he were coming into today's world with his past experience, that he'd
Hmm.
really be able to make something when theater is allowed to start up again. Because effectively, that's what he did when FDR, was developing the Federal Theater Project and all that. And you think about all the things that came from that. I feel like Orson was a real innovator, so he might really thrive now too.
Yeah, I guess with just expanding the tools at his disposal,
Mm.
trying to imagine what kind of work he might make now would be quite something.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that in addition, I guess, to the authenticity thing, is I'm constantly amazed by my friends, by my family, by human beings at large, at how adaptable we are.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's
absolutely.
something to be said for someone of Orson. Well, I just like to think about the potential of anybody to do anything at the time that they're born, and thinking they would still have that same capacity, whoever they are. That maybe is a bit Pollyannish, but yeah,
No, no, I
I
agree.
human potential is human potential, and I feel like all of us are capable of of
Yeah.
reaching it. Yeah.
Oh, that's a lovely sentiment. I'm sure Orson would love to hear that as well. I mean, what a terrific choice! And you've got one more person coming to dinner. We know where we're having it. We're at Dollywood.
Yep.
So it would be a crime not to invite this person. She is, of course, a musical legend. She's worked with everyone from Elvis to Nora Jones to Willie Nelson to Johnny Cash. Her talent as a songwriter can't be overstated, and as a philanthropist and businesswoman, she's almost second to none. Your guest, your last guest, is the universally adored Dolly Parton.
Yes. What a woman.
Oh,
What
what
a
an absolute hero. She was a choice. I had wonderful Isa Bonachera on the podcast a few weeks ago, and
yeah.
Isa chose Dolly as well.
Yeah.
And she's just amazing. I mean, when I read about Dolly, uh, I guess something I didn't know, or maybe sort of had heard but didn't quite remember, whatever, is the the extent of her musical genius. I think.
Mm.
Like, when did you become aware of sort of Dolly and her music?
So I would say my true appreciation for Dolly probably didn't surface until I moved to the UK. There was something about the homesickness, I guess, that I felt when I moved here. And there was something really comforting about country music, and about,
Hmm.
and anytime I would hear Dolly's voice. But there is I hope it's okay to mention another podcast,
Oh,
but
please do.
I was advised to listen to, Dolly Parton's America, and it's a podcast by Jad Abumrad, and he
Okay.
basically, you know, the depth of my love for Dolly was really, brought to life by listening to that podcast. But even before that, I knew she was just this kind of constant.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I think there's obviously, like, "I Will Always Love You" as a song. I think my mind was blown when I found out that she had written it, because you think of Whitney Houston. But
Do you want your mind to be blown just a little bit more
oh, you know it.
in relation to "I Will Always Love You"? Dolly Parton did absolutely write that. She also wrote another song on the same day, Jolene.
I mean,
In
amazing.
one day, she
But
wrote those two songs.
But that's the thing. So Dolly Parton is a virtuoso, and she has a real, and she'll talk about this, and I know some folks may take issue with the wording, but it is meant in a universal way. She has a gift from God, and she used it. And
Mm.
she says that in the most Dolly way. And the way even she talks about God, she's like that, that's my relationship. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's just I know,
Hmm.
and part of that relationship is music. And
Hmm.
she is so many ways like a channel. And from the time she was a little girl, she just was living, breathing, loving music. And she's so prolific in her writing. And that's what's fascinating to me about her is that she's been doing it for so long that, in that one day she wrote those two masterpieces, but she was doing it every day before that as well.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
it calls to mind. One of my teachers said once, we remember Mozart and we remember Beethoven, yes, because they wrote wonderful things, but they also wrote the most things. And like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not to diminish the things that these people wrote, but it's just to say it's the constant devotion, the practice, the love of the thing, or
Well,
sometimes the hate of the thing, the difficulty of the thing that
yeah. I
coming
think
back.
that that's such a good point. And I think also what that also represents when you're able to constantly produce such top quality work, it's what sets apart your sort of one hit wonders
Mm,
from your kind of absolute legends, like people who are able to keep reinventing themselves or their music. It's why, with the greatest of respect to someone like Lou Bega, Mambo
mhm,
Number Five was great,
mhm.
but he didn't make 15 hits of the same quality or 20 hits of the same quality.
Where's
Dolly
Mambo
Parton is someone who's
Mambo number 6?
always Mambo Number Six was the sadly missing or disappointing sequel.
But
But
that's I
yeah,
mean,
Dolly's able to just put out so much quality stuff that
mm,
that really sets her apart as an
it's really
exceptional talent.
and she's also a real, bridge builder. Again, this podcast is a real deep dive, and I didn't know this. She's a film star.
Hmm.
I mean, she's so funny in 9 to 5, and she wrote the soundtrack for that. She wrote the song 9 to 5 on
Yep.
set. Like,
Oh man.
I mean, yeah, she's incredible, but she's also, in terms of authenticity, she is exactly herself, and she makes fun of herself, and one of the ways that she continues to be in the world is always having an eye to what people are going to say about her in terms of, well, I'll be able to make fun of myself along with them. That's why she's had, and she says it herself, like, that's part of the reason she's had a lot of longevity is she's like, yeah, yeah, I know who I am. And I'm here
Yeah.
to make fun of myself. And I'll, the some of the talk show hosts like Johnny Carson would come in with the jokes about boob jobs and looking cheap, but she'd make sure she was doing it before. She was always kind of one step ahead.
Yeah.
Um, and she's just talented and joyful and wonderful and just a nice person.
That
Um,
and that can't be understated enough, like how much of her as a persona, as a kind of as a business or as a phenomenon, her personality is so key to it. She's so warm, so
mm,
genuinely caring,
mm,
and so considerate as well. Like there was the news story recently where she renamed one of the attractions at Dollywood her Dixie Stampede.
mhm,
She removed the word Dixie after she discovered that it sort of had potentially offensive connotations. And like she just dropped it. She just said, what her exact words were, as soon as you realize that something is a problem, you should fix it. Don't be a dumbass. I would never dream of hurting anybody on purpose.
I
Like
love
that is just
yeah.
brilliant in a time where we're all, I think all of us can be so guilty of like doubling down, digging our heels in,
Yeah.
refusing to listen to the other side, but a kind of global fear seemingly of ever being seen as being wrong. You always have to be right about everything. Like to have someone just say, "Oh, okay, sorry, that's a mistake. I'll fix it." Like it's
Yeah.
so amazing.
I think the lifelong learning aspect as well. Like she's been doing what she does for so long,
Hmm.
and she changes with the times as the time changes. But it seems again to come from a place of, yes, absolute business acumen, but also sort of changing with the an empathetic change with the rest of the world, I guess. There's so much
Hmm.
empathy in
Hmm.
her work and what she does, and I admire that so much. And it is that, again, that that sort of authentic joy. Like, I remember now, this story was told to me by a housemate who went to Glastonbury, but basically, Dolly Parton and James Blake were on separate stages at the same time at
Mm-hmm.
Glastonbury. And at the James Blake show, I guess, people were singing along, and James asked them to stop because he said, "I'm the one who's singing." Let me, kind of let me sing. He didn't probably say it in exactly that way, but he basically told them to stop singing. And so a lot of people left and went to Dolly Parton's show where she's like, "Come on, everybody, sing along." The absolute, and she is a serious, serious artist, but she doesn't take herself. Her whole thing is like, let's be serious about having fun, but let's be serious about being emotional. There's a song, again, it's mentioned in this podcast, and I had heard it before, but I'd never really heard it before, if you know what I mean. Uh,
Yeah.
it's Light of a Clear Blue Morning,
Oh, I don't
and
know that one.
it's just breathtakingly beautiful and hopeful. It's just all about, I can see the light of a clear blue morning. It's kind of like that thought of, it's terrible right now, but I can see the light in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
I think in these really, there are tough times for all of us, and Dolly's one of those people, one of those artists who people turn to for that little bit of light, and I just admire it so much. So, yeah,
Yeah.
and the fact that we'd be at Dollywood as well. I'm like, I think I wanted to make Dolly comfortable, but I also hope that she would be able to stop working and come have dinner.
Yes, absolutely. Although I think you would be well within your rights to hope for a little private tour of Dollywood from Dolly as well.
That would be so great.
That'd be quite something. I mean,
Yeah.
she is just amazing and warm and kind and supremely talented.
Mm.
Of all those huge number of different things that you could talk to her about, it's an almost impossible question to answer, I know, but like if there was only one thing that you had the chance to really delve into with her, what do you think you would want that to be?
I think I would delve into, hmm, how do you start writing a song? So, I mean, it's a that's such a question with such a huge answer, but, like, I think I started learning guitar because I'm, in the very early stages of it, but partly because of listening to Dolly talk about her songwriting, and, I am a singer even though I don't really sing anymore, and,
Hmm.
yeah, I think I would just ask her, how do you when you wake up, I guess she would just say, "You just start. You just start." But, yeah, I think I would ask her about songwriting, and how do you start if you've never really done it, or if you're scared. I'd love to hear her warm, loving answer because I know it would be just the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder when she's writing a song, like when she wrote I Will Always Love You or Jolene or 9 to 5
Mm.
or any of these amazing hits that she's had or written for other people. Like, I wonder at the end of writing that or as she's going, does she know she's onto a winner? Like, sometimes when you're writing a bit of stand up,
Yeah.
you sort of have that feeling, you're like, oh, I think this could be quite good, or I think people like this. Um, yeah, I wonder if she has that kind of instinct.
That's such a good question. That would be such a good question to ask her.
Ah, she's
Hmm.
just what a brilliant guest, and what a superb collection of people. You've got Jacques Pepin, Whoopi Goldberg, Maurice LaMarche, Orson Welles, and Dolly Parton. I mean, at Dollywood. Ah, this is just breathtaking stuff, Liz. One thing I love to ask people as well, and it's not necessarily something that I might have mentioned to you to consider, so this might be a little bit of an off the cuff one.
All
But
right.
if you thought of like a common thread, like is there a quality that all of these guests have, or a universal reason that you're attracted to these people or personalities? Like, is there anything that you think runs through that group that you say, I've put together a group of people who are this or who exude this or make me feel this or think this? Is there any kind of common thread you think between
Mm,
them?
I think I think a lot of it comes down to daily passion
Mm-hmm.
for the work. So whatever anything that these people apply themselves to, there's that passion that they each have. If when I think about what Maurice was saying when I spoke to him about voiceover, when I think about Whoopi Goldberg's trajectory from the One Woman Show all the way through till now. When I think about Jacques Pepin and his journey with cooking, when I think about Orson and his journey with theater and recorded medium and Dolly and songs every day, it's that passion for the day to day, I guess. Like there are all those big things that happen that I'm sure happen to all these people in their lives, but it's like it's the small things that they would do daily that
Mm-hmm.
ended up making their career. So
Mm.
that for me is what I'm sort of looking at. I'm thinking, well, how do I spend my day today? What am I passionate about? And this podcast gave me a chance to think, well, who does inspire me and what am I drawn to? What am I passionate about? So yeah, I think they all they share a passion for the daily work on
Mm-hmm.
what you love, um, and sometimes
Yeah.
don't love. I mean, I'm sure all of them would be like, "Yeah, sometimes it really sucks. Sometimes I don't wanna write."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that passion that I guess keeps you coming back and makes you curious. I think the curiosity, yeah,
Oh
is
God,
probably
yeah.
a shared quality.
I think those two things, passion and curiosity, I think
Mhm.
no matter what else is going on with a group of people, so long as you've got a healthy dose of passion, a healthy dose of curiosity,
Yeah.
you could never be bored for a second. I think they're
Oh,
great qualities.
yeah.
That's a superb answer. Well, Liz, the only thing we now need to know is what you would be cooking for this group. The one thing you did mention to me when you said you were inviting Orson Welles was that
Mm.
it would have to be a big meal.
Yeah!
So, so I'm
Now
hoping that you've got some big plans for this menu.
well, I realize it might actually be a little bit too small because I've only gone for 3 courses, but I figure I would pad it out with a cocktail hour
Oh
and then
yes.
also, what do you call it? A cheese plate. A cheese plate. So I know that we started out saying that I have never cooked a Jacques Pepin recipe, but because of that, I decided, and this is a big risk because he's gonna be there, that
Wow.
I'm gonna cook 3 courses all from Jacques Pepin's book,
Oh my goodness.
The
This
Apprentice:
is
Life in the
going
Kitchen.
from 0 to 60 in 1 second. This is
It's a really
amazing.
Connor, it's a really scary evening, okay?
Oh, this is brilliant. I'm sure Jacques would absolutely love this.
Yeah.
Well, what are these three courses?
So, the first course would be now this yields 6 first course servings, so there could be a lot of it, but, actually no, because 'cause we'll be 6 people, that's why I chose it. Anyway, maybe I'll double the recipe. In any case, it is moule ravigote, which is mussels ravigote, whatever that
Mm.
is, and it's, as I'm reading through the book, it's a standard at most good French bistros and brasseries and was a regular dish at, one of the places that Jacques cooked. Um, so it's mussels, white wine, mustard, red wine vinegar, parsley. It's sort of like
Oh,
what you would have with moule frite, and that would be
yeah.
first course. I thought, oh, especially I'm imagining it's going to be winter time in Dollywood, so something warming to begin would be nice.
Excellent. Yes, I love that.
Mm. And then the second course is something that apparently Jacques Pepin served this classic quite often to the French president Charles de Gaulle.
Oh yeah. Oh
Nope,
wow.
no pressure, but I'd be doing I'd be doing a roast leg of lamb Provencal.
Ooh.
Um, and that, yes, so that is a leg of lamb with lots of butter, uh, parsley, garlic, shallots, or as we say in the US, shallots. Um, some a white bread, so you'll have like a topping on the roast leg of lamb. But the reason I chose
Mhm.
this is because apparently it's like a typical centerpiece for a Sunday lunch in
Oh,
France.
yeah.
So I thought something rich, warming, but sort of family friendly,
I
I guess.
like that.
And I was thinking
Yeah.
of roast potatoes and greens on the side just to finish it out.
Oh,
Um,
my goodness. That sounds
yeah,
amazing.
doing that, and then finally, I would say the pièce de résistance, but I think it's more just the end of the meal. Um, uh, it would be Jacques Pepin's, apple tart, but it's called Maman's apple tart because it's the one that his mother used to make.
Oh.
Um, and because I just thought, well, I'll try to, even though maybe that's a bad choice. I'm like, "Hey, Jacques, I'm gonna make some homemade." He's gonna be like, "This is terrible." But basically, it's an apple tart, and, apparently the dough is made in a very unusual and
Ooh.
an unusual manner, or in a way that Jacques was trained exactly not to do it this way.
Oh,
Um,
that's interesting.
but apparently it comes out tender, crumbly, and light in texture with a delicate taste. So it's,
Oh.
yeah, just apples, sugar, butter, and then, you have your lovely crust and you make the apple tart. Now, for my part, and I hope this wouldn't be, um, I hope Jacques wouldn't be opposed to this, but I would like to try to make homemade vanilla ice cream as well, uh, to go with it. But yeah,
Oh. You
yeah,
are giving yourself quite a task with these. I mean,
it's a lot.
what a menu. What a fantastic menu.
But
And
I
I
feel,
definitely chose the wrong time just before dinner to hear it
oh, I'm
because,
so hungry now.
oh God, it's so alluring. It's amazing. Sumptuous is absolutely the right
Yes.
word to
Oh,
use.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. We'd have wine and we'd have sherry afterward and things like that. I would do that
Oh,
because
excellent.
sumptuous is the name of the game. So
Oh, I could definitely see Orson Welles kicking back in a cozy chair
I'm so
with
glad.
a sherry after dinner, feeling
Oh,
very satisfied.
I'm so glad you said that because Orson, I feel like, is the person I'm most worried about. And also, I think it's important to say one thing I thought about is I would be taking a risk having Maurice and Orson at the same table, but I feel like Orson would get a kick out of him doing an impression.
Yes, it's always fun seeing impressions given of the person in front of the person. There's
Yeah.
a superb video of Peter Serafinowicz
Oh god, I love him.
doing, oh, he's amazing. His Terry Wogan impression done in front of Terry Wogan when he sat beside Terry Wogan, and
Oh.
the absolute fear in Peter Serafinowicz's eyes as he's about to do it. And then when he does it, Terry Wogan just breaks and he's just like, oh my God, that is so perfect.
I
It's
love
really
it
terrific.
so much. Oh, and Peter Serafinowicz, again, what an impressionist. Have you seen, I mean, his Michael Caine impressions of the Michael Caine acting instructional videos?
I don't think I have seen
Oh,
those.
do yourself a favor and watch, a little snippet of the original Michael Caine masterclass on screen acting,
Okay.
and go and watch Peter Serafinowicz's send-up of it, and it is perfect. And
Oh,
also
wow.
watch Michael Caine talking about people doing impressions of his voice. That's all. It's
That sounds like the perfect trilogy to
so
watch
funny,
together.
so
I know
funny.
Peter Serafinowicz's Alan Alda impression is just unreal. I know Bill Hader does a really good Alan Alda, but Bill Hader said in an interview that after he heard Peter Serafinowicz's Alan Alda, he was just like, "There's no point in even trying it anymore. Like that is the one. No one's gonna beat it."
I'm gonna have to listen to this because I watched so much MASH as a kid. I love Alan Alda,
Oh,
so
Alan Alda's such a hero, and yeah, Peter Serafinowicz's Alan Alda is uncanny.
Oh, I
Really, really excellent.
hear it.
Liz, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I'm so grateful. If our lovely listeners wanted to kind of stay across all things Liz, hear more from you, and see you live on stage, where could they check out all of your great work?
So I think I'm a little slim on the pickings online, but my Instagram is at Liz Guterbock and my Twitter is also at Liz Guterbock. And when gigs are up and running again, I will be posting when and where up there. And yeah, that's,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, we will add links to those accounts into the episode description. And we so love having you at Jericho Comedy. We really can't wait until our shows are back a bit more regularly and we can get you back performing with us again. It's always a treat to perform with you. Liz, thank you so much, and we'll speak again soon.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, Connor. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Liz.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.
That was such a great dinner party. I particularly loved hearing about Liz's encounter with Maurice LaMarche. It doesn't often happen that guests on the show have been able to meet their heroes. So when it does happen, they're always just such brilliant stories. Thank you so much to Liz for taking the time to think about that so much and to chat with me about it. And for goodness sake, Liz, seize the day. Think how happy Jacques Pepin would be if you made any of his dishes. You got to check out Liz's brilliant work online. We've added links into the episode description for her Instagram and Twitter accounts, so head over to those to get more of the Liz Guterbock experience. I know I say it every week, but I just love these conversations. I really hope you're enjoying the series as much as I am. You can check back over previous episodes. I've spoken to a brilliant range of people: comedians, mental health campaigners, impressionists, writers, political cartoonists, composers, astrophysicists, and more. If you're enjoying the podcast, a little review or share can make the world of difference in our ability to reach a wider audience, which we would really love to do. So if you do that, we'd be ever so grateful. The Dinner Party is a Jericho comedy production. If you want to hear any more from me, you can visit www.connormcreynolds.com and have a look and listen to some of my other radio, podcast, writing, and comedy work. I'll be back next week with the absolutely incredible Daniel Niels Roberts chatting all about his dream dinner party. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and bye-bye.